Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch, and mate, welcome back to you as well.
Thank you, Bryce. Thank you. It's been a big summer series, hasn't it, mate?
It was a great summer series.
It was great. Yes,
I couldn't wipe the smile off my face every time I did those interviews with you. Just hearing those transformational stories, and what was really encouraging for us is that people were really keen to listen to those stories, because we've had a look at the downloads and they tracked beautifully for people to hopefully implement that.
Yep.
And so we're excited about 2020 being transformation for
Another
a lot of people.
Huge year, Bryce.
Getting the foundation set. Hey, folks, we did that summer series. Ben and I took a break over summer, so we had pre-recorded those. So we obviously didn't get an opportunity until today when we're back in the current Ben to obviously agnowledge the fact that our country was on fire. So
difficult period for some.
We weren't able to talk about that during the summer series for the fact that that was pre-recorded. But just a shout out to any of our listeners that were. I cannot even begin to imagine what it was like for you folks that were facing that. I wasn't affected by that, Ben. And so for those people that were, our thoughts and our prayers go to you for anything that's happened to your life. One of the things that we wanted to shout out is Stiggy put some posts up to say where you could donate, and I know that there was a lot of fundraising activities, and I hope that continues. But one of our very special guests, Taria Pitt, on the Property Couch, she put together something that I thought was really great. I promoted it on my own socials. It was called Spend With Them. And basically, businesses that were affected by the fire reach out to Taria and her partner in that, and then they can be featured, and then you can support them so that they're getting some grassroots money back, which I thought was really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously most people head to the coasts or head to the regions over the Christmas and summer holidays, and you know those businesses rely on those revenues during that period. So it supports the whole township, because we also can't forget the drought that's also affecting our regional communities as well. So I think it's a wonderful thing that Taria's done, and also all of the fundraising. It does show you what Australia is all about. Mm-hmm. When we're backs against the wall, you see the best of Australia and the amount of money that we have raised and will continue to raise. I know in our business we've obviously also done something in that space. We're matching dollar for dollar for our staff in terms of the donations that they're doing. So that's the type of thing that we want to also do, because at the end of the day, this country is the great country that it is because of the people that live here. So, well done to those. But if you can spare $1 or $2, look at our show notes, check out what Taria is doing there and see if you can support it.
A couple of other things, Ben. You interviewed Nerida on Facebook Live this week. Thank you for filling in for me.
No worries.
I was out of the country, so I appreciate that. You also did your RBA announcement. Iris has stripped out the audio on that and put it up on the podcast. So if you haven't listened to those, go and check it out. This Saturday, you were interviewed by Chris Kohler.
So Your Domain, which is a show on Channel 9. We're talking about holiday homes.
Nice.
So we've done that before, and you get these little sound bites. You're going to get a few sound bites from me on it. In terms of whether it makes for a good investment or is it a good idea, because when we do go to those beach locations, we tend to put our mind into irrational state rather than rational state. So I was probably one of the people who are sort of saying be careful in regards to why you're actually spending money in those particular areas. If it is a lifestyle decision, go for it, enjoy it. But if you're trying to get a return on investment, there are some pitfalls.
It was interesting. I was chatting to a real estate agent who specialises in that area just yesterday.
Yep.
And I said, how'd you go with your break over Christmas? You normally take a big break. And he goes, no, we don't take a break during January.
Correct.
We take a break in the middle of the year in winter, because January is a big peak time for them.
Yeah, Great Ocean Road Real Estate, was it?
Yeah, for that very reason that you just talked about. Hey, last thing before we kick off is, Ben, we bought some copies of our books.
Yes.
And that went really well over summer. So what we did is we went to our publisher and we bought some more. So there's an opportunity if you want to get a digital version of Make Money Simple Again. You can go to makemoneysimpleagain.com.au, which was all of the showcased transformations that we had in the summer series.
Yes.
And if you want a physical copy of our best-selling book, The Armchair Guide, we do have some more copies in here. You can, until they run out, you can go and check that out at thearmchairguide.com.au and make sure you get a copy of that. Ben, hey, my Mindset Minute theme today. We've got a very, we had this awesome summer series set up for January. We're now into February, and I thought before we kick off on the year, we'll go into our usual space of analysing current trends, give some frameworks around property and helping people transform their lives. But thought we'd set up today with an opportunity that I had to interview our guests today. And I thought my Mindset Minute, I want to give it a bit of a run-up.
Sure.
Ben, into it. So you're going to have to indulge me a little bit.
Please, go for it.
It's a parable.
Love a parable.
And I think the parable has got some enormous weight to it. So the parable of the Mexican fisherman and the investment banker. Have you heard that one?
I know it well.
So an American investment banker was taking a much-needed vacation in a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked, Ben. The boat had several large fresh fish in it. The investment banker was impressed by the quality of the fish and asked the Mexican how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, "Only a little while." The banker then asked why he didn't stay out longer and catch more fish, Ben, as all investment bankers would. The Mexican fisherman replied he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. I like that you're listening, Stiggy. The American then asked, "But what do you do with the rest of your time, Ivis?" The Mexican fisherman replied, "I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take siestas with my wife, stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life, senor." The investment banker scoffed. "I am an Ivy League MBA and I could help you. You could spend more time fishing and with the proceeds buy a bigger boat. And with the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats until eventually you would have a whole fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your catch to the middlemen, you could sell directly, Ben, to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery." How exciting is this? You could control the product, the processing, and the distribution. Then he added, of course, you would need to leave this small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, where you would run your growing enterprise. The Mexican fisherman asked, "But senor, how long will this all take?" To which the American replied, 15 to 20 years. "But what then?" asked the Mexican. The American laughed and said, "That's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO, initial public offering, and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You could make millions." "Millions?" said Noel. "Then what?" To which the investment banker replied, "Well, then you'd retire. You could move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take a siesta with your wife, stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play your guitar with your amigos."
Boom, boom.
Now, Ben, why did I say that? I love this very simple parable. I quoted it just this week to a friend of mine. My wife and I talk about it often because it brings clarity to what the money game is all about and definitely what it's not about. It brilliantly illustrates the illusion so we easily fall into when we're pursuing wealth and financial freedom. It's far too easy to build incessantly and forget the end game. Here we go, folks, the underlying point. We forget the end game is happiness and a fulfilling life. It's equally easy to forget all the goodness we're surrounded by today. So the truth is, it doesn't take a lot of money to live a truly wealthy life.
Correct.
Ben, if you haven't heard the parable of the Mexican fishing village, hopefully that's changed your life. If you heard it before, hopefully that's a good reminder of what you should prioritise, because it's not all about achievement and going forward. And as you'll see, I use that as a segue into our interview today, Ben, because what happened is you and I interviewed Matt Srama,
Yes.
who was playing for the Titans, NRL, late last year. And he said to me he bumped into Jaemin Frazer, who we've had on the podcast, who you know is a mentor of mine. And he said, "Look, I would love to actually give back to the community because I have been through the experience where I've been a high-profile athlete on good money, and then at the end of it, there was some frailties, there was some dark days,
Vulnerabilities, yep.
and I want to actually share with that." And I thought, he goes, "I would love to discuss that with Jane." I thought, well, you know what, I might even be able to make that happen. So I pulled the two of them into the room. And we had a really, really good chat about what this might look like.
Yeah, and obviously I was fortunate enough to have a little listen, Bryce, over the summer break, and so yeah, it's a great segment. Obviously, we are talking about high performance athletes, but I think, you know, when I was listening to it, I had no relationship to the high performance athlete. But in any of these types of conversations, I'm always trying to get the takeaways that are relevant for me. And I'm a huge fan of Jaemin's story, state, strategy process, and the stories that we tell ourselves, because we are the product of the stories that we tell ourselves. So I think from that point of view, it's advantageous to be listening to this. And even if you've got children who might be aspiring to be elite athletes, what story are you passing on to them? You know, obviously, Bryce, you know, and I've shared this with the community before, I have a son who has dwarfism. We were having dinner last night, and he was telling me that there's some kids in the younger grades, he's in grade 4 now, in the younger grades who want to race him all the time, right? Because they can beat an older kid. So Jack sort of understands that his role in that event is to basically be beaten because he's got short legs. So we obviously just explain to him, and we keep reminding him that his dwarfism doesn't define him. And that's like everyone in life, right? In terms of and the story that we tell him and how we go about explaining to him that, you don't have to race these kids. We understand what they want out of it, which is basically they're trying to find their order in the world, and it's all about them and obviously how that would make him feel. So I think it's those types of things that do remind us about whether our children have the opportunity to be elite sport athletes or those types of things as well, is don't live vicariously through your kids. Give them all the tools that they need, build resilience in them, but connect with them and understand exactly what they're going through. Because in our particular case, we're fortunate that he came to us, and then we get a chance to obviously give him all the tools that he needs to live a fruitful life.
Oh, well done, mate. Jack's a champion. I love his company, so very good message there. So what I want to invite the people who are listening to this is, it's framed around the professional athlete, but I'm going to invite you to not dismiss it just because you're not a professional athlete, if that's the case. Because Ben, I was just away last week. I was in the States. I was in the room with Tony Robbins. There was 4,500 people there. And he, for anyone who's seen I'm Not Your Guru on Netflix, you'll know that he, in a big room like that, he actually goes and does what's called an intervention, where he talks to one person. But he's so skilled and so clever at making the lesson land for the other 4,499 people in the room who aren't being one-on-one, to make sure that they get all the lessons.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that this interview is that. It'll set you up for the year. It'll remind you of some of the basics. If you use the backdrop of my Mindset Minute as a frame reference or a pre-frame to what we're about to do, because Matt, he's brave and he's very frank, and Jaemin is insightful and wise. So I hope that this has an impact on each and every one of the people in our community, so that you do set yourself up for a really great 2020. But like you said, mate, I'm going to offer you the opportunity to take a seat on the couch here, mate. Kick back, get your popcorn out, because we are going to cut to the interview that I had with Matt Srama and Jaemin Frazer. Hey there, folks. Bryce here. I've got a special episode today that I think you're going to really enjoy, because previously I've had my two guests on before. Jaemin Frazer, who you know is my own personal development coach, and we previously had Matt Srama on, who is an NRL star who's been involved in the NRL system. And when I was chatting with Matt, we connected the dots around the fact that he'd spoken to Jaemin, and also the story that people go through when they're a professional athlete. And I thought there was an opportunity to talk to you gentlemen today. So first of all, welcome back to the couch, Matt and Jaemin.
So good to be here again, Bryce.
Thanks for having us. Yeah,
it's a pleasure. And I just really wanted to take this opportunity, because it's pretty rare to get, from your perspective, Matt, the fact that you've been a professional athlete, you've gone through the process, you've ridden the cycle that comes from that, the excitement of getting drafted, to the excitement of your first game, to then earning good money, and then, unfortunately for you, there was a really promising career that was cut short via injury, and you've as we chatted previously, you've come through that really well and educated and balanced yourself to manage that transition out. But when we were chatting, you said that that's not always the case for professional athletes. So I thought the opportunity here was the fact that I'm a big fan of the frameworks that Jaemin talks about getting through insecurity. So I thought maybe through that perspective, in your point of view, that'd be a bit of fun. So maybe you could take us through what do you think is unique to professional athletes? What are they experiencing in I guess the bubble, because they are human beings, but they're put up on a pedestal by the people who adore the game that they play. What are some of the unique challenges that you've observed that professional athletes have?
Yeah, great question, Bryce, and you've nailed it right on the head. It is basically like a bubble. When you sort of reflect back once you finished the game, I didn't reflect too much when I was playing. It's when you finish and you get perspective, you realise, wow, that was literally like living in a bubble, so to speak. And I think the biggest thing that I sort of take away looking back now is sort of the old analogy, you know, finding who you are, and you sort of think of it, and you come out of school as a grade 12 guy, and your whole focus and dream is to play footy. And as we spoke on a previous podcast about mindset, and you know, and Jaemin can explain it later about discipline and things like that, and you're just so driven for this goal, and then you get it, and you're in this bubble. Once you retire, you sort of come from school as an adolescent, and you've just been in that bubble of sport, and then once you finish, it's sort of like, okay, now I'm actually like your identity away from the sport's gone. So, and you're right, a lot of people do struggle. I struggled myself, and I don't know a person who hasn't struggled to some degree, but I'd say that's probably the biggest thing is when, from an outsider looking in, just try to look at it as you're coming straight from school into a system that's designed for you, schedule's done, food's done. Then when you retire, it's like, okay, you go run along, and most guys have got families to support off the back of that. So there's a massive, you're at like an insecurity in that space, and yeah, it's great. Hopefully Jaemin can shed some light on that, because I know that's his little niche. Yeah.
Oh, he'll absolutely shed some light. But in terms of the what is it that you miss the most when you realise the R word comes and you retire? What is it that you've become so addicted to that when it's no longer there, there's a void that if you don't resourcefully fill it, like through the frameworks we'll talk about shortly, what is it that you're missing?
Yeah, when you reflect back on it, I think Tony Robbins has got the human needs chat, and one of them's significance. And I look at myself and other players, and I think that's probably the big one, the significance. And I was speaking to a welfare manager. The welfare managers, each club has them to support and help players. And I was chatting to one once, just a random conversation, and she was sort of saying the higher the profile of the athlete, the bigger the risk of insecurity and struggle post-retirement. And it sort of makes sense. It's like if you're playing Origin or the big grand finals, you're winning all these Dally M medals, your identity gets even more and more into that, and you'll put even higher on a pedestal, so to speak. So I think a lot revolves around that significance and your identity within the athlete. Like your name is, you're an athlete, and that's all you are. And I think that's a big insecurity coming out of retirement. It's like, maybe all I am is an athlete, and some guys have that mindset, I believe, moving forward. Like they actually can't escape that I'm an athlete and it's gone, but you know, I'll hold on to it. I'll do these luncheon, or I'll play again. I'll keep. That's why you see so many, they retire and they come back to play local league or something, because guess what? You know, Matty's playing local league for us now. It's that significance, I think, that a lot of them can't escape.
So, Jaemin, what's your observations of that in terms of, Matt referenced one of the 6 core needs, which is a big part of your teaching. But what are your observations of a professional athlete, and from that very small window? But also, how would you suggest that athletes could actually better resource their need for significance that isn't sort of external?
I mean, I think, Matt, you raised an excellent point around you come out of school and straight into this. So a big conversation I'm having with people all the time is moving from the child strategy around significance to the adult one. So the child, we all need to feel significant, but the child's only way of feeling significant is outside them. It's getting that validation, acceptance from people in their world. And so you leave school at 16, 17, and 18, and you are still a child. And so you have this incredibly wonderful way to meet that need externally, and it must feel wonderful. And it's done so well. Like you said, everything's done for you. Your name is up in lights. So it can create this false sense of security, because the moment it's gone, then while a person's grown in age, they've never upgraded their strategy. They're still running the child strategy on how to feel like a good person. And so in all kinds of trouble when that's taken from them, either by they retire or they get injured, then they're left empty. Their cup is they don't have no way of filling their cup. So I think that's a massive challenge for people. And we're talking about Greg Inglis, and when he retired, and in the media a couple of days later in rehab, it's like, and you're right, his name was up in lights massively, and being an Aboriginal man as well, even more so. The amount of honour and hero status and then I'm not that anymore, and if I'm not that, well, who am I? So I think the great challenge is doing the adult work as you're growing as an adult before it's too late and you're in this trouble where you haven't done that work and you're in deficit when it's taken from you.
Can we rewind a bit further? Because I remember having this conversation with you about, and you articulate it way better than I do, but when we're a child, all our needs are generally met, and then there comes a point where we flick over to get our needs externally referenced. So we thought we were enough, and then... Yeah,
sure. Well, I think the patterning is every toddler starts internally referenced, as evidenced by the fact that a moment a toddler has a problem, they demand it be fixed, and they have no problems, whether their parents are tired, busy, on the toilet, on the telephone, just come and fix my problems, because they think they're the centre of the known world. But then as they get a bit older, maybe past 2, they're a little less cute, expected to do some stuff on their own, maybe parents get annoyed with them, and so all of a sudden they're not getting that direct feedback that they're awesome. And so it begins the process of questioning their value and going, as a child, you don't have the resources to fill that yourself, so you have to outsource it. And then you work out the rules of the game. Okay, these parents here, I want their affection and approval. How do I get that? How does that work? And interestingly, the more I've looked into this, it seems that kids typically pick one person above all others to be the chief validator, the one whose opinion matters most. And it's almost like they put that badge on their chest and say, hey, it's your job to make me feel like I'm a good person, and I'll do whatever I need to do to get that from you. And I think the child strategy often maintains that. It's someone else's job, and if it's not someone, it's something else. So I think it's the sporting career, it's the fame. It's your job to fill my cup, and so the challenge is then it's fine when it works, and it works incredibly well. But then if that's the only strategy you've got, you're in a lot of trouble when it's gone and when it's taken.
It's good insight, isn't it, Matt, to think that that was the origin of where that all came from, because Jaemin always talks about the question, are we enough? And we ask ourselves that question, and we, depending on our answer, determines the actions that we take and whether we resource our needs externally or internally. So if you follow that evolution, a professional athlete's still just a human anyway. They've got a platform that's afforded them that most people don't have, but they're still a human who go through human emotions, and so they have that external significance tied to something that's adrenaline fueled, highly addictive, fuels their competitive spirit, and all those. So it's almost like the amount of times that people would look at you and your peers. You're so lucky, it's so amazing. And then if you do fall off the rails at the other end, it's like, well, you didn't take advantage of your opportunities, but you're still just a human who's trying to solve that question that Jaemin was talking about before. So what are your observations of your teammates, your peers, the people in the industry around the very thing that Jaemin just described?
Yeah, and it's funny, a lot of these mindsets for me, and listening to guys like Jaemin and yourself and about mindset and insecurity, came after retirement, because I was struggling in a way, and that's when it all sort of come to me. And I look back now, sitting in locker rooms and things like that, and you have these conversations with teammates, and not on a vulnerable level, but just sort of chatting. And I look back now, it's like, far out, that's their identity is footy. Like everything revolves around them being an athlete, so to speak. And examples like for myself is like, you feel better when someone says, oh, you had a great game, or oh man, you won man of the match again. You're a legend. You're so good. But what about me as a person? Like, how am I on the Richter scale of a human being, so to speak? You know what I mean? And you ask any footy, I don't think any footy player who's currently playing would. Oh, some might. You know what I mean? It's becoming more awareness, but majority would rather put a lot of their validation on Fox Sports, look at that. One man the match again, and that's.
Yeah.
But rather than, well, who are you as a person? You could be knowing deep within you, you've got, and a lot of them, it's the dark side. Drugs, alcohol fill these voids. But if they're winning man the match and and pleasing you're all good. And then I think that's where the big struggle comes when that's gone as a retired. You haven't got that to resort to, and you're left with you as a person and I've had friends of mine who, alcohol, drugs and abuse, things like that. That's how they fill those voids post-retirement. And such a common thing, like depression and retirement link so much. And it's really sad, with the most recent one not that long ago with that AFL guy. It's crazy. Like it's a really common thing. There's so many guys you don't hear about as well on the lower scale in league and AFL and all sports for that matter. Yeah.
Matt, Jaemin, what's your observation on what Matt just said there about filling voids through all sorts of addictions? What essentially are people doing when they're trying to numb that or make it go away that's not resourceful? And what's potentially a more resourceful way to handle some of those pressures or some of those situations?
Yeah, I mean, we've referenced 6 core needs a few times. Anthony Robbins' finest contribution, I love it. And he just... The key understanding is there's no judgment here. We're not bad people because we do bad things. We do bad things because we're needy people and we just haven't found a better way. So if you don't have a high quality strategy, you end up sucking up an unresourceful one that hurts yourself and hurts others. And that, when it gets found out, like when players get found out some of the crazy stuff that's gone on to fill the void, it's a big scandal, it's a big blow up. It's not pretty. So, I think the aim of the game to be a human being is to work out how to fill your own cup. It's actually to do the adult work. It is the role of parents to prepare their children for adulthood, but often parents just focus on physical and financial adulthood, like self-sufficiency. Can they earn enough money to pay for their needs? And great, footy career, that's excellent. All their needs taken care of. Can you take care of your physical needs so I don't have to wipe your bum and dress you good? Well, you're an adult now. It's great, but what about emotional, relational, psychological self-sufficiency? That stuff is often massively undervalued and not even focused on. And I think the challenge for people who get shot into the light early on is they don't need to take care of that because everything's taken care of for them. And that system works so well. You get so much affirmation and value from that. Like, what could compare to walking out in a state and having people chant your name? Like, what could possibly compare? So you don't need to do any other work because it's all working so well. But the moment that stops, there's nothing. So the challenge for every person is to continue the journey to be an adult, which means to work out how to fill your own cup and be self-sufficient, not just physically and financially, but relationally, emotionally, mentally, and to work out how to go, do you know what, I am not what I do or who likes me or how many Man of the Match awards. I am me, and when I come to the world full, then I'm free to go be at my best. But I don't need to be defined by that. So if it was to stop, or it was to lose it, or it was taken from me, I'd survive. It'd be okay. There'd be another evolution. There'd be another thing I could show up as and contribute to that would be life-giving rather than it all being about this one vehicle.
We've kind of hinted on it, and the three of us know what the 6 core needs are, but for the benefit of the listener who's listening to this who's not aware of that, maybe you could see how that fits into the picture here.
Well, just briefly, certainty and variety are the two, and they operate in pairs because they pull in tension. We love comfort and order, structure. We like to know what's happening. But if you have everything known, you get completely bored. So we also need adventure and spontaneity and excitement. So variety, we crave that as well. So those two needs. Then significance and love and connection. So those two kind of pull in tension. We want to know that we matter, that we have value, that we're worthwhile. That's a journey into our own identity. But love and connection, we're relational beings, so we want to belong and fit in. So if you have 100% connection, you feel smothered, and 100% significance, you're isolated. But those two are essential. And then contribution and growth, so adding value to others and then adding value to yourself. So it's just so interesting to understand that every single behaviour in some way is an attempt at meeting one or all of those needs. And I think the real challenge, which Robbins points out, is that if one vehicle meets at least 4 of those needs, it becomes a very powerful addiction. And if it was to be taken from you, you are left in an incredible amount of deficit, which I think a career, earning big money, having fame like that, that's providing so many of those needs all in one go, to then go from that to nothing must be an incredible shock for people.
What was the penny drop like when you sort of realised that? Because the significance you get from being an athlete, from the adulation, and then you have the uncertainty of being on the big stage, and then you have the connection with the fans and your camaraderie with your team. So what was the penny drop moment like when you realised, oh, okay, that's actually I can actually understand what it is that's driving a lot of the professional athletes?
Yeah, you're so right. Like when I heard Tony Robbins' 6 human needs, and you reflect it back to being an athlete about how he says 3 or more, it covers nearly all of them, doesn't it? And it really does. And I guess that's a huge one. And Jaemin said it so well. You're in that space, and you are essentially addicted to, and it's awesome, but it's basically gone like that. Like when you retire, some people still recognise a thing like that, but and that's why I was saying before, the higher the profile, the bigger the cliff. Yeah. And for myself, I was really grateful. I had a great career, but by no means was I a superstar or anything like that. So, and I had a year to I knew retirement was coming due to injury and doctor's advice. So I had a year to sort of plan and to get in that scare. The injury and the news was a shock, but in terms of till that contract ran out, I had a bit of time to plan, and I really stuck the head down and try to get things sorted. But in terms of most guys, it's they'll come to that 33-ish age, some late 20s, and it is a quick drop, and your significance is gone. Like you apply for jobs and no one cares who you are. You know what I mean? Like you've got no experience. You left school at 18. I remember missing plenty of jobs. Like they love the Titans. Oh yeah, you know what I mean? But you're just not experienced enough, and you hear it with a lot of guys. Like they go for work, and that's why so many resort. They're not confident in their ability to grow. And like you said, growth is one of our human needs. They're not willing to grow. It's just they'll accept. I was at my prime as a human being in those 5 years as an athlete. I'll go back to.
You'd feel bulletproof too, right?
Oh, 100%. And then when that shield's gone and you're labouring, nothing against labour. Some people love it, but I know a lot of my friends, they hate waking up in the morning and going labouring for work. But it's like that. I'd had my peak as a human. I can deal with this now, and then it's just a downhill. The pressures of, again, I'm grateful that I was a single guy retiring. I had the pressure of kids and family, and some of the wives never worked either because they're supported by the man.
Well, in some cases, the partner also ties into the significance of being around a professional athlete.
That must be interesting. That's a really cool observation, because I am married to or connected to a superstar. Now, who are you again? You're a labourer. I'm married to boy.
The divorce rate's big.
Is it?
Post retirement. And that's not to say women are only in it for one but it's like that tension in a relationship that you need to keep growing in a relationship. But I know a plenty post-retirement that have parted ways for whatever reason, but it could be correlated to that. There's more stress and tension in life, and obviously to have a fulfilling relationship needs to be 2 full cups.
Really, for sure.
Yeah.
I was just going to say before, I love the coaching frame because it just doesn't bring any judgment. So we're not saying, you shouldn't expose yourself to that because it's so risky and dangerous. Like, it is a wonderful experience. I could only imagine how wonderful. The point is, if you do the adult work in the process, then you actually get to go from strength to strength, and one vehicle moves on, and then you get to find the next vehicle. You get to grow, and you get to go, okay, what's the next experience I get to go have? How do I plug myself in, rather than it always being about the vehicle? So I think that's an important distinction to go use it, like enjoy that experience, but beware, there's some dangers associated if you don't move from child to adult in these years. You'll get smashed when your bulletproof shield is gone and you're still a child and you're trying to live in an adult's world.
So if someone's listening to this and they can relate to Matt, they've just got an opportunity, they're in the development squad, or they're just about to get a career, and it applies to everyone, but just using this as an example, and they had the opportunity to sit with you to help them do the adult work that it requires to enter the platform and the stage that they're about to enter. What are some of the keys that you'd be sort of imparting on them to help prepare them for the path that they're about to undertake?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'd start. I saw a T-shirt, a guy wearing a T-shirt down the street just 2 days ago, which said, "Don't grow up, it's a trap." So I think there's still this weird thing that somehow adulting is hard and being a child is fun.
Yeah.
It's like, well, sure, in some things, but just to flip the switch and go, being a child is actually not that fun in an adult world, in an adult body. If you're still relying on other people and external things for validation, that's actually killing you. So every cell in your body is designed for maturity and adulthood, so you're going to be okay. You've actually got what it takes to grow up anyway. You are enough. All insecurity is built on a work of fiction anyway, so these fears you have about being no good outside of what you do are just in your head. So just kind of dialing down some of the pressure and pain associated and fear associated with growing up and being the adult, just to go, it's the natural thing, and it's actually a very life-giving process. So rather than, oh, you should grow up, you need to take responsibility, you need to stop being immature, it's like, well, you can if you want, but this is actually funner, easier, and more life-giving. So it becomes moving downhill rather than trying to struggle your way to something you don't want to do.
You referenced before that it's based on works of fiction. For the benefit of the audience, what do you mean by that?
It is a breakthrough kind of idea that when people start exploring this insecurity and trying to work out how to solve it, they often feel as a victim of what has happened to them. It is what it is. You can't change the past. My day was hard. My teachers called me stupid. I've had this bad experience and that bad experience, so I am stuck by what's happened. And it's their truth. But the amazing thing is just the human being is a storyteller. We're a sense-making creature. All we have is story. And so we tell stories about those experiences. That's the stuff that shapes us. So you have a painful moment and you decide the reason you had that painful moment was because it meant something bad about you. So you tell a story, and often those stories go unreviewed and they move from being fiction to non-fiction. They gather so much evidence that that's true. So it's useful to go, it's just a story. You're going to be okay. And it's a story told by a 4-year-old, even more so. So it's going to be a weird story, a story that's not well formed. Part of the adult work is to go back and review the data around that storytelling and just upgrade some stories, tell a few better stories, and keep telling better stories. People who succeed, they just keep telling better stories and upgrading their stories, even though they're still just as much fiction as the other ones. They're just high quality fiction.
How does that land with you, Matt, in terms of stories that some of the athletes might be telling themselves post-career, in terms of, sure, they don't have all those external references, what's going on now?
Yeah, just as you say, something that comes to mind, I guess, is like insecurity with obviously big 100-kilo guys aren't chatting about those sort of things in the locker room, but I dare say a lot of them would be internally sort of saying them to themselves, I'm not good enough. Like these stories of, I was a footy player in terms of skill set, in terms of the workforce or as a person. Like I've had conversations with guys where you're just talking to them and it's you can just feel the insecurity. Like, man, you've achieved something that only a percentile of that should bring confidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's and Jaemin's. I've been to Jaemin's events before where about mindset shifts and things like that. It's like an abundance sort of mind. Like you should be projecting, having confidence that you're literally in the 0.0 something percent of all the kids in Australia who ever played sport. You got there, so you've got that. You can use that to your advantage in the real world, like so to speak. So when the sport's gone, that's not your identity. That's another tick in the box. And for me, that was sort of like a penny drop sort of moment. As I said, I didn't have a huge career, but it was more, I just wanted to play one game and I achieved that and I ticked the box, and it's given me confidence to go out in the world and not be fearful, because knowing that you can, if you put your mind to something, you can achieve it. But as I said, I've noticed the higher the profile, the bigger the fall, just because of it's so significant in their life that's who they are as a person, and that's all they're capable of, so to speak, if that makes sense. Like, so many just put a label on, that's all they can they can
this
achieve.
Is who I am.
This is who, and
I'm done.
I'm done as a human. Whereas probably the biggest advice I say to a lot of the younger players now is the window is so small, and you realise once you're done, man, that was such a small part of life. When you look at life as a whole, it's literally shorter than your school time being an athlete. So it's such a small, it's just in that phase, as Jaemin said, of the child to adult phase. It slips right in there. You can't be playing professional sport as a league or AFL at 40, 50. So it's that window of that teen to teenage where everyone else is sort of finding out who they are. You're still in this bubble of, and then you come out, and then it's like, as Jaemin alluded to, you're sort of still in that child mindset. Yeah,
definitely.
It's ironic, isn't it? Because the people that project onto the athlete think they've got everything that they need in life and they've made it, but the athlete's thinking, oh my gosh, this is the only thing that defines me. I better hold on as tight as I can to keep it, otherwise
as long as I
can. I'm stuffed. And then because you're seeing a lot of professional athletes now putting their hand up and saying, I've got mental health challenges. And based on what we've been chatting about, you can see if you break it down and work and think about what's going on for the athlete, you can see why that's happening. But for the majority of the people who idolise them, who are working in jobs with average, in some cases average or less pay, seeing all these pay packets going around, their first thought is, what could possibly be wrong with your life? You're on a squillion, and people watch you each week. So it'd just be this vicious cycle.
Yeah, and just on that, a big mindset quote that I love, Tony Robbins, is swapping expectation for appreciation. That's probably the biggest one I tell a lot of the kids is, you don't actually realise till you're done. That was literally the best job ever. Yeah. And you tell a story with yourself. And it'll be hard to ever get those feelings of what you had in that job and the pay packet and things like that. So appreciate it rather than expecting, and like it's always expecting. I know, and I talk to some of my mates who are still in there and they're having a bad day because old mate took their spot or they've hurt their knee and they're on a 3-year contract and 6 figures and they get to wake up, train for 2 hours and go home to their family. And it's until you retire you realise,
that wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad at all. Like there's bigger issues in the world than getting dropped.
Yeah, it's not like now until you reflect back, you go, shit, the primary school years probably were the best years, but at the time you couldn't wait to get out of them, right? So I can relate to a certain extent, and I'm certainly not trying to pretend I'm anywhere close to a professional athlete, but mate, I'm a degree qualified accountant who found himself on television.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you were a qualified accountant.
Yeah, I used to use my personality as contraception. So the point landed.
Just that took a little while.
The guys in the room, they've heard that one before. So the point is that I'm this guy who all of a sudden was thrown into a scenario not too dissimilar, right, where I'm a nobody to all of a sudden my work is being judged by people that I don't know, and then when people would do keyboard warrior stuff, I thought that was a professional lawyer from Middle Eastern suburb, leafy suburb. When I worked out that it was people who weren't really comfortable with their own life and starting to pot shots at other people, but I was outsourcing how my happiness was based on, did the episode go well, did we shoot well, how did that episode go, did it rate really well? And because I did 4 seasons on Foxtel, I've now done another season on ABC, and it probably wasn't until about the 3rd season where I worked out, this is a mugs game, just riding the roller coaster of what do people think, what are the ratings like, and so I've always been interested in personal development and growth, and interestingly, when I first met Jaemin, I've told this story before, I didn't think there was any new tricks for me to learn. I thought the only difference between where I was and where I needed to be was application. I'd read heaps of books and stuff, and that's what I like about the unique frameworks that Jaemin has. But I can understand that outsourcing stuff, but I quickly grounded myself and I just built systems around me that allowed that. Grounded myself in my family. I didn't spend my time outside of television talking with other television people. Just put some stuff around me that allowed me to not outsource my happiness to that stuff. But until I started to implement the insecurity frameworks, I was still finding other ways to meet my needs unresourcefully, like everyone else does. I just made sure it wasn't that was the path that I would do that in. Changing story. if someone's listening to this and they're going, changing story, sure, we're in control, and the premise is, and I'm borrowing your words, but you're not just the actor in the story. You're the person who wrote the script in the first place, and you've got the permission to rewrite the script. What happens to people who've just so ingrained? How do they slowly chip away at the fact that they're not the passenger, they're not the actor, they can actually write their own script? And what are some of the simple steps that people can take if they're an athlete, or there's someone at home, they've tied their job promotion to it, or whether they win the award in their netball club on the weekend, or whatever it is that they're getting their significance from? How can they slowly chip away at knowing that they are in control of the story?
That's a great question. I'm going to use a Mr. Miyagi quote poorly to answer that question. Sorry for the fans of Karate Kid. But telling Danielson on his first lesson he asked him if he was going to cross the road. He said, if you say yes, I'm going to cross the road, that's safe. If you say no, I'm going to not cross the road, that's safe. If you maybe cross the road, that's when you get hit. So do or don't do, there is no try.
Yeah.
So I find the storytelling piece, when people try one little step to rewrite their story, they don't ever rewrite their story. And in fact, they get hurt in the process, because then they build up this belief that you can't, it's too hard, it's too mysterious, it's too complicated. So I think fortune favours the brave. And there's this stuff that happens internally when you say yes, when you understand something and you actually go all in. So I think the little step, which is a big step, is to go, you are the storyteller. So that's no small thing to get your head around, and to go, I'm actually going to own that. Well, that changes everything, right? Because it just means I can't start blaming everyone else for why I am where I am. And if I feel no good about myself, that's actually my own story. I decided that I was no good. No one else did that for me. So then I am the only one who could change that. So I think, the all in is the little step, which is the big step, rather than 3 simple tricks that are lightweight and don't actually give you the result. Like you know me, I'm non-negotiable about behaviour management stuff.
I do know you.
The personal development space is full of lightweight fluff. Just write 3 affirmations on your mirror each day and think happy thoughts and attract good things to you. And well, yeah, that's fun, but it doesn't work. So you're going to be still where you are, and you're going to build this residual disappointment that you're not getting anything, and that's going to further increase the insecurity because you're not as good as the people who are changing. So I would never suggest that's a wise strategy. Cross the road or don't cross the road. Don't half cross the road, because that indecision's you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So
the biggest breakthrough for me, Matt, and I'm not sure what it is for you, but when Jaemin reminded me that the story he told earlier about the child, which is why I asked him to replay it because it resonated the most with me, was there was some point where you thought you're okay. And then there was a tipping point where you decided that you weren't okay. And I think for me, the story changing, because I probably thought, but I'm from, and I'm this, and because my biggest insecurity is looking young, right? I've looked young my whole life, and I created a story around what it looked like to be young. And then I actually found out that my dad said that kids should be seen and not heard. So all I thought in my mind was, well, if I look like a kid, no one will pay attention to me, therefore I will not be heard, therefore I won't be enough. So then I had all these strategies around overcoming that. But then just the simple reminder that there was a time when I was okay, and I believed it, and it was true. And just because I've told a story since that says that it's not true, doesn't mean that I can't return back there and use that as a starting point. Because the more that I do that, the more that I go, because I'm sure some people listening are going to say they're too short, or they're too tall, or they're too skinny, or they're too overweight. They're from the wrong country. So there's always something. But if they were to rewind far enough back, fair call?
Oh, it is a fair call, and you have to go all the way back to the start. If rewriting your story, I watch people try and start from today and go, surely we don't have to go back. Like, please, there's this aversion to the kind of therapy model of the 1980s, laying on a couch and tell me about your dad kind of thing. But if you don't go back, then the moment you get tired, the old story comes out. So you actually got to deconstruct it, and you do have to go all the way back to the place where where you started, you were enough. Like, there was no question in your mind. You were okay. You're right. At some point, you decided that wasn't true. You made sense of some pain, some loss, some disappointment, decided it was about you. You've heard me talk about the 2 questions kids ask and answer. Well, we all ask and answer as storytelling.
Brilliant, yeah.
Why did that happen and what does it mean about me? At every single experience. And so the storytelling happens around painful moments and we answer those questions negatively. Why did this happen? I've somehow deserved it, attracted it. I'm at fault. What does it mean about me that I'm no good? Mm-hmm. People pick that up, put it on like a jumper, see in the mirror they're wearing that jumper then defines them. I am the jumper. But it's just a jumper. Like, it's actually an imposition to who you really are. Of course you're enough. Everyone else knows that, just you don't. So, yeah, but going all the way back to the start, it is an essential part of the storytelling piece done well.
And 2 very good questions, because Matt, Jaemin and I know someone mutually who was abused, physically abused as a younger child, and that affected her going forward. But the breakthrough was what you just said, when you said, instead of because of the abuse, therefore I am, it was going back to that moment saying, because of the abuse, I therefore told a story that I am this, and that is where the pain has gone from that point forward.
Of course, people don't like going back into pain because they think, why would I want to go back and relive memories? And it is what it is. You can't change the past. Of course, but you can change what you made the past mean, and that's the point, because it wasn't what happened that impacted you, it was how you answered those 2 questions. So again, it's just like, you're going to be all right. You're just reviewing data. You're just exploring storytelling. Storytelling done by kids too, which on their best day, they're going to write some weird stories, let alone their worst day. So I think it's just so fun to dial down some of the fear and pain around this work, as though it was something mysterious and too hard and too scary. It's okay.
You're quoted, in fact, on the front cover of your book to say that no one's got a unique problem.
You're not special.
Count that out. You're not special, because there is a elegantly simple solution to complex people problems.
There is, because I think we get in our own head and we think we're the only person who's ever experienced what we've done. And if we're the only person who's experienced that kind of pain, then there's got to be a unique solution for that. And who knows if there is one exists. Mm-hmm. But when you realise, they're universal problems, we all go through the same kinds of challenges in different ways, then the way out's predictable as well. And it can be broken down into frameworks and tools that anyone can apply. So that's useful, because it's like, it's not complicated and unique, just simple and hard. So that's fun.
That'd be useful in your walk too, wouldn't it? In terms of rubbing shoulders with these folks, and I'm sure you're rubbing shoulders with people at the early stage of their career, people in the peak of their career, and the people on the other side. But I wonder what it is their answer was to the 2 questions when the lights went away and the crowd went away, and they said, "Why did this happen? What does it mean about me?" What sort of story they're telling themselves?
Well, as you're talking through that, Jaemin, it just brought up like my own experience and things I've learned as well about story. And it correlates so much with identity and who you are. And as I said, I've listened to something from Tony Robbins about the whole blueprint of, it's basically your story. And for me, it was a massive penny drop. They used an example, and for my example, it correlated so much to me is from a young age, you've got this story in your head. It's like your blueprint of life, basically. It's mapped out. I've got this and I want to do this by 18, play Queensland Cup. And for athletes, we tag it a lot with goals like that. Like, I want to make Q Cup reserve grade by this age. I want to be player of the year this age, blah, blah, blah. Tick, contract, full term. This is all going my blueprint of my dream of being an NRL player and a star or whatever. And an injury might come, you might get dropped, or you might have to move overseas, and that wasn't part of the blueprint. Especially for me, that I had aspirations of wanting to play Origin or winning a grand final for the Gold Coast, or playing till I was 35 and having an illustrious career. That didn't go to plan, so it's like you feel that sense of that wasn't my blueprint, and that's where you feel that emptiness, I think, and why so many athletes get lost. It's that blueprint has suddenly gone off track, and it's sort of looking at it, and Tony Robbins says it well, and guys like Jaemin, it's rewriting that story, reflecting back on that blueprint, and you can either change yourself, change your story, or sort of blame others. And most of society, whether it's being an athlete or people in general, like to blame. So, and then they'll just be stuck in that space. And I feel that for athletes, it didn't go to plan, got a career-ending injury. It's poor me. Like, why me? Yeah. Seriously, out of all the, you know what I mean? And you put that tag, but it's like, hold on, you can scribble that and use it to grow and rewrite the whole story. So it's like, use that injury, that door's closed, that chapter in your story's done. It's so exciting that you've actually got the pen and you can write the next story and the next part. So,
were you able to do that at the time? Like, obviously you've been exposed to the frameworks and it's something that's part of your belief system now, but can you take us to the time you were 26, the doctor over a period of a year, and then finally said it's not going to happen? What happened in the preceding days, weeks, months around that? And clearly you're a balanced human being who spent some time with you, so you're certainly not necessarily dining out on that. But I'm sure there was some days that were like,
for sure. And the thing is, not many people like to talk about that as an athlete when the R word, retirement, comes along. But definitely for me, knowing that the blueprint is not going to go the way it is, it's sort of like, okay, I can stay stuck in the space of why me, you know, why injury, why me, and things like that. But it was sort of like, okay, this is an exciting opportunity now where I get to sort of spread my wings as a human and try differently. I had 3 different jobs. I just went bang and done a course in real estate and then did a bit of this, and that is cool. It was more, as I said before, swapping that expectation for appreciation and realising that you're in charge. You're the author of your story, and you can use what you had as a platform, really. And where I am at the moment, there's so much more growth ahead, but at the moment I feel as though I'm right where I need to be in terms of my job now. And it's like, well, if I didn't get injured, and I wouldn't have had this story to tell the younger kids coming through now. It's like far out, but that's because the blueprint, I accepted the change, and that took probably 6 to 12 months of accepting.
Wow.
You know, so many people would say to me, "Are you going to play again? Like, oh, you're still fit. You should go." And I'm just like, well, I'm happy with how it is, and that's a common thing where guys retire. It's like, oh, where are you going to play now? Like, what local comp, or, you know what I mean? It's like, what, you're gonna quit your identity as a footy player?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so exciting. It's really exciting. That's what I say to a lot of guys who are retiring, and I know they're struggling, but it's like, man, really enjoy it. It's truly exciting once you, as Jaemin says, if you take the handbrake off and you accept that change is happening. Like, change is inevitable, isn't it? Part of life, so you've got to accept it.
Jaemin, I'm observing that people's numbing strategies are getting more and more prevalent, right? Whether it's alcohol, whether it's gambling, whether it's drugs, whether it's addiction to porn, whatever the vice is, and it's not just something that's with professional athletes, although they get an elevated, heightened experience. But you know, your mission is to pinch your words again. Insecurity left unchecked leads to madness, right? So are we heading towards a bit of madness, and how do we stop that? How do we turn it around?
I mean, I think that social media just heightens the issue. I'm not sure if it's actually any worse than it's ever been, but I think we see it more, and we have conversations about it more because we're a bit more aware of the problem. So mental health is a very common term, and I'm fascinated by how people think about that as an issue, though, because it doesn't seem helpful to me. It doesn't seem, just because you know mental health is an issue and we have Mental Health Day and you're allowed to put your hand up and say I have mental health, it doesn't stop the prevalence of these numbing strategies. I just think mental health needs a backstory in order to survive, and it needs an insecurity backstory in order to survive. It's a weakened concept of yourself. That's why you're mentally unhealthy. You don't know who you are outside of what you do. So when that's taken from you, you have no stability and descend further into a madness because you don't know what to do and who you are. So I think we see it more now, which is great because that means the issue's on the surface. So my whole intention is to provide something thought through and something intelligent to solve that at a deeper level, not at the mental health level. That's just the end of the line. Not at the addiction level. That's at the end of the line. At the core level, which is how do you become an adult? How do you do the work of filling your own cup and validating your own existence and taking the external sources and internalising them? How do you do that work in a strategic way? And so I think if you can do that core work and groundwork, then the end of the assembly line is very different. The addiction, the mental health, they don't show up. They don't need to.
So maybe we can wrap this discussion up around that in terms of you talked about adulting, and you talked because if people want to get access to more of this stuff, I'd certainly recommend they go to your podcast, the Insecurity Project. You've got some resources that flow on from that, but just in terms of some takeaways for people, how can they show up? How can they do adulting well? And what's some of the steps that if someone's resonated with something that Matt said or something that you've said, or they go, I can see myself in that addiction or that challenge, what would be some of those?
Yeah, well, I think awareness and responsibility are the two words that create change. If you can't see it, you can't change it. And if you're blaming someone else for it, you can't change it. So that's where I'd start to go, are you willing to turn the lights on, take a step back, and just some gentle inquiry to see how this is not just your issue, this is a human challenge. And if you can see it like that, you're much less likely to get stuck in your own experience of it. If you can get some distance, you see it in terms of patterns, then you see it predictable, you see that there's a process. And so you go, to solve any problem, all you need is the proven framework and someone skillful enough to hold you in the space. I mean, that's what you guys do so well here. You go, property, it's such a messy, weird, like all kinds of, there's a process, there's a framework, and here's how it works. Trust the process. So you go, cool, there is a process to becoming an adult, and there are people that do that really, really well, and they don't get there by mistake. It's not some lucky thing that they stumbled on. There's some work to be done, and so I think the more you can understand that work and that process and give yourself to that process, then the more you start to address these issues in the real world. So I don't want to give easy answers or simple, but I think that awareness and responsibility is probably the big picture simplicity to go see it for what it is, and be willing to take responsibility for being the only one who has the ability to change it. If you make this someone else's problem, you leave yourself very vulnerable. You're fine if you make it the world's problem to validate you. That's fine when they do good at it. And for a long time in a sporting career, they do very well at it, exceptionally well. Yeah. But you're vulnerable when they stop doing that. You've got no other way. So finding how to do that yourself.
That's a good way to think about it, isn't it? It's fine. It's fine when it's there, which is what the professional athlete has. But then when it's not there, it comes tumbling down. I want to say thanks for being so transparent and open. And what we might do, if it's okay with you, we'll put your details in the show notes, because if there is someone who's an athlete who's at club level in their junior club or all the way up to marquee, and they can relate to your story, they might get some value out of reaching out to you for being someone who's been prepared to tackle this and say, I rode the highs, I rode the lows, and then this is how I made sure that I didn't stay in the lows. So I think that'd be really useful, and we'll also put some deets in for you, Jaemin, too, because I'd certainly say that from my own experience, I have learnt the most from applying the frameworks that Jaemin has been talking about. On his podcast, there's an opportunity to listen to other people put their hand up and say, this is going on for me. And you can see how these frameworks actually get played out. It's like you're a fly on the wall. I've said that to Jaemin a number of occasions. You can't do too many of those, mate, on your podcast, which is really good. And we'll also put a link in for Jaemin's got a book and some other resources, so we'll write that in there. But I think it's been really helpful. My goal here, when I brought you guys together, was I just think this conversation is something that not a lot of people know how to start the conversation, but if this podcast, this episode can act as a beginner, or if they want to forward it to someone to say, listen to this and let's have a chat afterwards, hopefully we can unpack some opportunities for people to grow and for people to go from a child to an adult so that they can do life really well, because I can say from my own personal experience, moving from the child to the adult, and I'm still a work in progress, but the outlook's better from here than it is from outsourcing it to everyone else. So thanks again. It was good to have you back on.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Really appreciate it.
And mate, always a pleasure to catch up with you.
Excellent.
All right, Ben. I must admit, I really, really enjoyed that conversation. It reminded me of some of the basics. It reminded me of where we get ourselves into trouble, and it reminded me of how you can quickly spiral into madness if you don't get on top of some of these insecurities that we've all got.
Yep.
It's okay, we've all got them.
Yeah, we're not unique.
But I thought that the way that Matt was brave enough to talk about some of his own insecurities and what they might do, not only for other professional athletes, but for every single person who listened to that.
Yeah, I mean, when I was listening to it, I suffered from anxiety when I was younger, quite a lot of anxiety, in fact. And no one really knows much about that. But even today, I still have to try and manage my levels of anxiety.
Hang on.
You knew this.
No,
sure.
that is not true. I did. You are like,
seriously.
When the situation calls for anxiety, you are like the stoicism, calm. Like, I'm the anxiety guy. You're the one that's just...
No, and this is what I'm saying. That is not unique. So I've had very, very bad episodes of anxiety. I used to have really strong episodes of anxiety on Sundays. Before work or before schools and all that type of stuff. So, but
why? Tell us why.
Well, ultimately, the story you're telling yourself, right? So it's all about. In my particular case, I was anxious about money very early on because my household used to fight about money a bit. So that always used to get me. And also, I've had experiences.
Your parents' household.
Yeah, my parents' household, and I also had experiences with my dad that. Made me anxious when he might have been drinking or something along those lines. I won't go into too much about it. But ultimately that's the sort of stuff that can build anxiety. So I don't suffer as much. I've learned how, and this is why we share, right? Because my money used to control my household or my parents' household. I worked very hard through my teen years and into my early 20s where I've got some mastery. Still, like with all mastery, you can always go back a couple of pegs. But now, in terms of money management, I'm pretty proficient. I know what I'm doing. And that has also then led me into, one of my big drivers, as you know, which has always been about financially being free and financial peace. And so the fact that I am now financially free and financially, I could stop work, I could do all those things. And it comes back to what they're talking about here in terms of filling my cup. What fills my cup is helping others. That's it. The money piece is a byproduct of what we do now, but what fills my cup and what I love about doing what we do is exactly that. I get great joy out of doing that and now doing it on scale. Which is what gets me up every day and what motivates me. So there you go. So,
bravo, man. That's I did not know that. I knew a little bit about the Sunday thing, but I didn't know that there was anxiety. So, but there's a lesson for the listeners, right? Because here I am knowing you. I think I know you pretty well, right? And then that's part of that story was news to me. So.
But the language is important too. Like I've always said, I suffered from. Whereas if I say I experienced anxiety. Like in other words, it's not something that's controlling me, but I think everyone gets anxious. Public speaking, whatever it may be, there's episodes of that, and I really related to what Jaemin was saying around the work you've got to do, and in owning that story and changing and rebooting that story. It's far better than motivational moments and sayings and that type of thing. But we do use sayings as part of trying to embed an understanding and a story.
It's part of recrafting the story, but
correct.
It's about knowing that.
He even used them as well,
fixing
right?
That are important.
Fortune favours the brave. I am a huge believer in having a go. I talk about it all the time. Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. And I'm a huge believer in, people who blame others. That's something that, and I've got experiences of that because I've grown up in a household where we've both had very similar experiences, my brother and I. But for some people, it's up to others to solve their problems and not up to them. So I think there's a bit of work to be done there. So I'm always.
Well, Jaemin says that. He says two brothers with exactly the same upbringing. One has outcome A and one has outcome B that are on the opposites, and they interview them and they go, well, what would you expect with the scenario that I had? And then you go to the other brother, what would you expect? And it's interesting the way that they tell different stories from the same circumstances.
Correct. So hence the stories that we've told ourselves, and they are just stories, right? And they are, in terms of what Jaemin's saying, in terms of their fiction, they're stories of fiction in terms of how you treat them. So I think there's a lot in that, and I've always been the believer it is to be, it's up to me, and I say this even around people. If you rely on the government to get you to where you need to be, if you rely on the education system to get you to where you need to be, if you're relying on third-party sources to transform you, you ain't looking in the right area.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't looking in the right area.
It reminds me of that Jim Rohn quote. I'll see if I don't butcher it, but an education will earn you a living. Self-education will earn you a fortune, right?
Yeah.
I butchered it totally, right?
No,
but it's basically saying
it.
one thing will get you a job and one thing will get you financial freedom. So
And it's hard. I mean, I learned a lot when I completely changed my career and took a risk in leaving my home state and basically setting up camp in Queensland. And, you're vulnerable at that point, right? Like, this is you. You're out on your own. I learnt a lot from the great gift that my parents gave me around travel and experiences. And I'm a huge believer in different cultures and different experiences. And that was a good footing to sort of say, look, hey, that my issues compared to what I've seen out there are not issues at all. And I was able to create a successful career in an industry that I had no experience in, and then obviously rebooted. So you do get some confidence out of that. And I think that's what Matt was sort of talking about, is like, my NRL career doesn't define me. I'm not defined as an NRL player. It's just a moment in my life. But when I was there, I showed up to give it my all, to enjoy it, to be the best I can possibly be. No, whatever you do, if you take that attitude in terms of continual improvement, incremental improvement, continually getting better, don't rest on your laurels, you're going to be successful. Cream always comes to the top. And a great friend of mine said that to me many, many years ago when I started our business. Again, no idea what I was doing, 15, 16 years ago. He said, look, Ben, I know you, cream always comes to the top. And that gave me a level of confidence because he was a successful self-employed person. And I had a go.
Yeah, you did have a go. I like that, mate. I think there's a lot of lessons in this, and hopefully...
long episode too, but I think it's a good starter for our first one back after
Kick it off next year. Next week we'll be back into frameworks and property and finance and money management, but we thought this might be a good way to set it up. So, hey folks, my life hack today is, in my experience, I found leaders are readers, Ben. So they're trying to get more information in. I'd actually suggest that saying leaders are readers are probably extending to leaders are readers, listeners and watchers, right? Because of the way that we consume.
I agree.
But I'm finding it increasingly more difficult to read books because the way that I learn, reading is actually third on my list. And I've only sort of realised that because listening is number one, watching is number two, and reading is number three. So I didn't read. I heard an interview over summer with Kevin Systrom, who co-founded Instagram. Later, he sold it to Facebook for $1 billion. And on a side note, the founder of Snapchat knocked back an offer from Mark Zuckerberg for $3 billion in his late 20s. You got a big kahuna to be able to do that.
And $30 billion
from Google. I know. But I get distracted. So Kevin Systrom gave this as a framework, and I think it's a life hack, and I've used it over the summer, and it's really helped. So when you're reading because I read a lot of non-fiction, Ben, I'd like to think, I started a fiction book over summer. I've got about 2/3 of the way through it. Andrea rings me. She goes, are you going to finish that book? And I'm like, yeah, I'll eventually, because I need a book. So she's lapped it. She knows the end. She goes, you should get to the end. It's like, man, but non-fiction, I'll carve through it.
Yeah, I'm the same.
So here's his framework. Number one, read the table of contents. Nothing world-breaking there. Number two, familiarise yourself with the structure. Okay, fair enough. What's going on with the bigger picture here? Read the last paragraph in each chapter, because often it takes the whole chapter to get to the main point at the very end, right? And then
he's hacking a book.
Right? This is a hack for me. Reading's number 3, Ben. So I need some hacks here because there's a lot of stuff I'm interested in, but I just can't get through it.
Yeah, true.
And then he suggests then number 4 is you then start reading, Ben. So you got the 30,000 foot view. You know what's going on. You got the general gist of it, and then if you can do a bit of speed reading,
there it is. Nice little life hack. I like that one.
As Alan Calder said to me, why are you speed reading, Bryce? Just slow down. It's like, fair enough. So there you go. That's my life hack today, folks. If you can relate to me and you need a little hack, there's one for you. If you can't relate to me and you just voraciously look through books and you just consume them and do not need any hacks, I'm sorry, wasn't able to serve you today. I'll try and come up with something else for you next week. Did you know, Ben?
Did you? Just before, I want to throw one last bit in there, because you heard us just then quickly talk about, throwing back 3 billion, throwing back 30 billion. That's a perfect example of our amigo, right? He's like, they weren't doing it necessarily for the money, right? They thought they were on a good thing. Now, in some cases, they may have been, like, if you listen to Business Wars or something like that. I did listen to that series recently, and
that was amazing.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? I mean, it's a fun way of explaining what's going on in the business world and competition and so forth. So if you haven't checked that out, that's not a bad podcast for those who are interested in business. But what it's saying is, you either think the value of your business hasn't been realised yet, or you're doing it for other purposes, right? You're having fun. It fills your cup. It's giving you whatever it is that you need to do. So I think there is a message in there, because us talking about the billions, we don't want to lose the fact that, it's not about the money for us. It's about helping others.
Well, yeah, and the point is that, for you to be able to, in your late 20s, stare down an offer of 3B and knock it back, must mean that there's something bigger driving what was going on for you.
Very good. All right. So, Bryce, did you know a couple of little Australian facts for us? As we, the first one here is our first police force in this country, Bryce, was made up of well-behaved convicts. That is a fact.
Okay.
So how do you build a police force when you don't have a population, but you're trying to get the bad crooks who are coming over? You get the well-behaved ones, and you hope like hell that they stay well-behaved and they keep the bad convicts in order.
Who of you only stole one loaf of bread? All right, that's in that corner. 2 loaves over there. And
those of you who robbed 4 houses and took all of the jewellery, you stay where you are.
No, I didn't know that.
Obviously, big news over Christmas was Brexit.
Yes.
So the population over there. I just thought I'd share a little population.
What about Megxit? Did you have a look at Megxit?
What's Megxit?
Come on, mate. That's where they left the royal family.
I spend a lot of time focusing on the royals. Obviously, you're referring to...
Headline level, mate. You can't miss it. Harry and Meghan have left.
Well, yes, thanks to, obviously, the media attention they were getting. In the UK, Bryce, there are 248 people per square kilometre of land.
Yes, okay.
Compared to Australia, we have 2.66 people per square kilometre.
Wow! So it was interesting when the Americans started to realise how serious our bushfires were. Yeah. Did you start to see the analysis of what they did? Is they superimposed Australia over to the United States, and we're pretty close to the same size. And they're like, "Whoa, those arsies! They've got the same size as us." Like, yes, America, there are things outside of your country.
20% of US people have passports, Bryce. 20%, and they usually are only going into Mexico or the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So the people who do travel, trust me, it'll enlighten their world in terms of the beautiful world
out
out
to
there.
Our American listeners, if there are some.
Okay, last one. A big celebration this year for our national carrier, Qantas. 100 years of travel. So, yes, you can find our podcast on Qantas and Jetstar. Just a little plug there. Mm-hmm. But I was reading an interesting fact, and that is that Qantas, which stands for Queensland and Northern Territory Air Services, in case those people didn't understand. So that's probably the biggest thing that's ever come out of Queensland and Northern Territory. And that's not a joke. I think it's fair to say that it's probably the biggest thing that's ever originated out of there.
100-year company.
If anyone's got any bigger thing that's come out, 100-year company,
Mick Dundee,
national carrier, those types of... Mick Dundee. He was a New South Welshman, but anyway,
he was up
Paul Hogan.
He was up in the... when he got the crocodile.
Anyway, back to the story. They conducted an international flight, Bryce, on cooking oil.
Fair dinkum.
Back in the day, they used cooking oil in their engines to conduct one flight. So there's a little interesting fact over there. 100 years of history. It wasn't avgas, aviation gas. It was basically cooking oil.
They weren't cooking with gas, but
they were cooking with
We'll,
Cool. All right, so there you go. Did you know, Bryce?
No, thank you. Hey, I appreciate you hanging out on the couch there whilst we went through that, mate. It was good to get you back at the end. And
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for your contribution. I appreciate
Appreciate
that.
that.
Special shout out to Matt and Jaemin. Thank you for your contribution, folks. I hope that serves you and sets you up for a great 2020. I certainly believe in the frameworks and the information that we shared. So, Ben, we showcased this particular concept over the summer series. So, mate, I'm going to build it up for you, mate. Until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listen to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.